Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we are going to be making some more stuff with our fresh figs that we got from our neighbor. So we have a lot to use up, so we've got to use those up pretty fast, or maybe freeze some for later, we'll see. But today we're going to be making cornbread coffee cake with fresh figs and walnut streusel from Vivian Howard's Deep Run Roots cookbook. And the first thing we do is to make the streusel. So I've got all of my ingredients prepped thanks to all of my team, AKA my family. So everything's all measured out, almost all. And we're ready. So I've got some brown sugar here. I've got the walnuts, obviously, and there might be a little bit of butter there because I used the same knife that I used to cut up my butter. Have some rolled oats. We had the old-fashioned rolled oats. I'm sure it's fine. Probably don't want to use quick oats, and you probably don't want to use steel cut oats, but any sort of rolled oats is fine. I've got some cinnamon and some salt and a little bit of whole wheat flour. So first I'm going to use my hands for this because we're about to use our hands a lot. So I'm going to sort of toss this together with my hands to get it well mixed, especially so there's not like a whole big clump of cinnamon or sugar in one spot. And you know that brown sugar tends to clump up, so I think that's pretty good for that. Cinnamon smells delicious. Oh my goodness. All right, and now I've got my butter that I just cut up. I don't know if I've shown you how I do this. I just use my big knife, cut it lengthwise, both sides, and then cut it into like tablespoon type bits. And that just helps you start with, and it's cold, just so you know, cold and unsalted. It just helps you sort of start with this process with your butter already smaller than the big, like a whole tablespoon, right? So now we're gonna kind of pinch it together to get that butter a little bit smaller and start to mix it in with the other ingredients. So I'm gonna be doing this for a little while. And I think the goal is until it forms a wet crumb. So we don't want like big clumps of butter, just like we didn't want big clumps of sugar. We don't want a lot of dry stuff in here. So I'm gonna just keep doing this for a little while. So it's starting to sort of all come together when I pinch it, and I don't see any spots of really dry mixture, and anything that's sort of clumpy I can break up when I put it on the cake. So I think we're pretty good. We're pretty good now. And that took just a couple of minutes. And I'm gonna wash my hands and clean up a little bit and set up to make the actual cake part. I think I'm gonna stick this in the refrigerator just so it doesn't get all melty until we're ready for it. All right, our next step is to make the cake batter. So just like most cake batters, we're starting with butter and sugar. We have softened, unsalted butter here. I'm just gonna get it in my bowl, scrape as much off of the wrapper as I can. And then got some sugar, just plain white sugar here. And then we're going to cream this until it is light and fluffy. She says about 4 minutes, so we'll see. She doesn't say what speed, usually kind of about medium, but start slower, so. I'm just gonna scrape it down a little bit, see how it's doing. What you're trying to get here is super light and fluffy where you can't really tell there's sugar granules in it anymore. You introduce air and you get them mixed together really well, and that's a good base for your cake. So keep going. I think we're pretty much there. I'm just gonna give it one more scrape down. She says after the next part to make sure you scrape down the bowl periodically, which I always do. So I'm just getting ahead of the game. And I'm gonna let it go like another minute maybe, but I think it's just about there. I'm gonna call that done. And now we're gonna add eggs one at a time, making sure that each egg is really well incorporated before we add the next one. And I don't know if you could see, but at first when you put the egg in and it starts mixing, it looks kind of curdled. That's fine, that is normal, it happens, and then it will come together. Now we have to mix a few other things before we add them in here. I'm gonna wash my hands. Now she says to sift these ingredients together. I don't like to sift. I'm going to whisk them together. Accomplishes pretty much the same thing. So I've got some more whole wheat flour here. Got both baking powder and baking soda here. So that will provide the leavening. And we've got a little bit of salt. So this is our dry ingredients, other than the corn, which is already in there. That should be fine for this. I'm gonna set that over here because we also have to put together other wet ingredients. The reason that the corn can go in here is because it doesn't have gluten, so you don't have to worry as much about over mixing and developing the gluten and having a tougher cake. So you get the wet ingredients. Okay, so now we're supposed to whisk this in another small bowl. Since I've already measured out one of the ingredients in here and it will all fit and it doesn't have eggs in it, so I don't have to whisk it too hard, I'm just gonna put it in the measuring cup. So we've got buttermilk here, almost the last of our buttermilk, thankfully, and before it went off. I've got some apple juice here. It calls for apple cider, but I happen to have apple juice on hand and not apple cider, so I'm using it. It'll be fine. And some vanilla. So I'm just going to use the same whisk I used for the dry ingredients, and I did the dry ingredients first, so I didn't have to worry about using a different one. Just get this mixed up. There we go, vanilla. All right, so now we're going to alternate adding our wet and dry ingredients in here in about 3 batches of each, starting with the liquid and ending with dry. So here we go. I'm just okay. She does say to do this on low. And again, it's because you don't want to develop the gluten too much and you want to get it all mixed. All right, so we're on our last bit of dry ingredients. So I'm just going to pour that in. So now I just have to fold in a couple other ingredients. I have part of the figs, it's about 1/3 of what's in the recipe, that have been stemmed and cut into 1/8. These are really ripe. And then this is supposed to be sour cream. We had some creme fraiche, countertop creme fraiche that we made. We've got a video for that here. And I will hopefully link it up there too. But I'm just gonna use that because it's pretty much the same thing. And I wanna, not waste it. So use it up. And we just fold this in with our spatula. think we're done with that part and we're ready to put it in the pan. So we have our 12-inch cast iron skillet here that we're gonna bake it in. It is obviously not hot, but it has been coated with some unsalted butter. So hopefully this won't stick. And we're gonna put half of this mixture in the bottom here. All right, and now we're going to put our streusel evenly over the top here. Use all of it. All right, now we put the rest of the cake batter on here. There we go. Wash my hands again. So now we have the rest of the figs in the recipe that have also been stemmed. So you cut the stem off and then cut them in half lengthwise, and we're going to just put them on top. Sort of spread them around the whole thing, and hopefully it will be enough and it will be beautiful, and the cake will sort of come up around them, so you don't have to worry too much about pressing them in, but I just want to make sure they stay where I put them. I chose the sort of slightly firmer ones for this, of the ones that we had, so that they would stay together. Some of the other ones, if you have softer ones, definitely put them in the batter in that portion. There we go. So I've got my oven preheated to 375 degrees, and we're just gonna put this in the middle and bake it for 40 to 45 minutes. So it should be golden brown and puffy and beautiful. And she also says to let it cool a little before you try it, probably so it will stay together, and she likes it better the next day. So we'll let you know what it looks like when it's all done and what we think about it in just a minute. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make cornbread coffee cake with fresh figs and walnut streusel. So this is a great recipe for either breakfast or dessert. It was not that difficult. It didn't require any sort of special equipment beyond, I mean, we used a mixer to make the cake batter. Probably don't really have to do that. And we did use a cast iron skillet to bake it in as she suggests. I'm sure you could bake it in a, in a regular pan. Whatever you have that will hold that amount of ingredients would be fine. You just might get a slightly different texture on the outside because the skillet, tends to sort of make a little bit of a crispier texture on the outside than sort of a baking dish. Whatever, it would still taste delicious. We enjoyed it. We shared it with some friends and they really enjoyed it. It did make my mouth feel funny with my fig allergy, even though the figs inside were, cooked a little bit more. I think maybe the figs on top didn't, maybe whatever cooking does to that, there wasn't enough of it to break down the latex. Whatever. I haven't looked it up recently, but like cooked figs are usually not a problem for me. This still made my mouth feel funny, so I didn't eat much of it, but it was really good and it was really easy. And if you want to keep it, she says she prefers it more the next day. If you want to eat it after that, if you don't have that many people eating it and it's going to last you a while, I would definitely store it in the refrigerator because you have those sort of moist figs, especially on the top, which will be more likely to mold, which I think happened a little bit to our last piece that sat here for a while, not in the refrigerator. So if you're going to keep it for a while, definitely refrigerate it. And I'm sure this would actually reheat or thaw, would freeze and thaw pretty well. And you could probably, microwave it for a little bit just to warm it up, and then it would be delicious. So all in all, if you have the fresh figs, we would certainly encourage you to make this because it was really good, especially if you don't have a fig allergy. So if you enjoyed watching me make this, please give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else next week.